You know, there's a wonderfully defining moment in a series of the Crown where an absolutely exasperated Queen Elizabeth says to Charles, "Look, you and Diana are the two luckiest people on the planet. For God's sakes, will you stop whining about yourselves and worrying about your self-fulfillment and just get on with doing your very minor bit of duty by the nation?" Well, whatever Charles and Diana were, Harry and Meghan are 1,000 times worse. They deify this insane culthood of victimhood, They besmirch every institution of their own nation and of the West generally. Harry made that ridiculous speech to the United Nations where he equated the United States with the Soviet Union in human rights abuses. They see racism where there is no racism. Meghan Markle has had the most privileged life in the world, and yet she claims she was subject to racism from a royal family which warmly welcomed her in. Harry seems to have problems with the fact that he's not the heir, you know, that he's not his big brother, and she just seems to be riding every bit of zeitgeist rubbish and as a result exaggerating all the bad influences in our culture in a really debilitating fashion.
But Greg, I have no trouble finding Conservatives who agree totally with you in every way. It feels like we're stating the absolute obvious. But the fact is, this couple has a big audience in the United States, in particular for their complaints, although in Britain their name is mud if polls are any guide. And I just wonder, is there appeal in the US? Because, you know, finally Americans have a chance to be sanctimonious about race and say, well, Britain is more racist than we are, and drag up their old inferiority complexes about the royal family and royalty anywhere. What's going on here?
There's a good lot of that in it, Andrew. I think you're spot on the money. I don't think that's everything, but that's a good lot of it. You know, in all the American sci-fi movies, the villain always has a British accent. And the Americans are both simultaneously have an inferiority complex towards the Brits and at the same time hold them in contempt. You know, there's a wonderful passage in Tom Wolfe's immortal novel Bonfire of the Vanities where the rich young couple are so happy when their servant turns out to be racist because that can make them feel morally superior to their Hispanic servant, you know, they're rich white people. Well, the Americans can now feel morally superior to the Brits. Of course, it's complete madness. And it's a sign, too, that millennials and I guess people under 50 all over the world have never lived through any, all over the Western world, certainly in Britain and America, have never lived through any hard times. So they see someone like Harry and Meghan, whose lives are defined by epic, magnificent, unbelievable privilege and self-indulgence, and yet they too can be victims. And in a sense, there's a democratic appeal about this because victimhood is the new sainthood. So no matter how comfortable and affluent and well rewarded and, you know, fat and happy and ridiculous you are, you can claim somehow or other that you're a victim because somebody didn't, you know, respect your identity properly, or you identify as a Calathumpian whale or something and nobody recognised this. So I think they exaggerate every bad effect in our culture, and certainly they besmirch Britain's name with Americans.
I think you're absolutely onto something there. I mean, for people who have never succeeded, it's wonderful to see rich people apparently as unhappy as you, although it's really quite fake. And for the rich people, they can pretend they can get rid of their guilt. See, we're really victims too. We've got all this money, but we're deeply, deeply wounded. So everyone's happy. Everyone's happy who's self-centred. But I should quickly switch, Greg, to something of great importance to Australian politics. 6 federal politicians, both Labor and Coalition, they're in Taiwan. The island democracy, and Communist China's state media again threatening all sorts of hell. The Communist Party's Global Times is saying we're playing with a fire that will burn us by having politicians encouraging Taiwan to think it's independent from Communist China. And I even hear some criticism that this is a provocative visit when, you know, China's just been nicer to us. But it strikes me that we're being asked to give in to bullying just because China's dictator smiled last month at Anthony Albanese.
You're absolutely right, Andrew. This is a very good visit. Good on Barnaby Joyce, a former Deputy Prime Minister, for leading it. Good on the 6 politicians, Labor and Liberal and National, who've embarked on it. And good on the Albanese government for not trying to discourage them. Now, we used to send a minister every year to Taiwan. And although I'm second to no one in my admiration of John Howard, it was the Howard government which started buckling under Chinese pressure and stopped doing that. We have every right to conduct normal human and commercial relationships with Taiwan. We've got a perfect right to have trade agreements with them. And it's in our interest to preserve Taiwan's international space so that Taiwan can still function as a de facto independent nation. Now, China is trying to strangle Taiwan, and it abuses and intimidates and bullies nations which don't toe its line. This is quite dangerous for us, this period of stabilisation with China. I mean, let's look at the facts here. China still has 2 of our citizens held hostage on entirely trumped-up charges. China still has $20 billion worth of trade sanctions levelled against us, which have not one speck of justification, not one iota of justification. Here we have 6 backbenchers without any formal government status, merely visiting Taiwan, and they're threatening doom and, fire upon us for our temerity to do that. China is a rank international bully. The Albanese government and Barnaby Joyce and all the politicians there are right to stand up to the bullying. And Tony Abbott went there as a former Prime Minister, good on him too, to stand up to China's bullying by expressing this modicum of solidarity with Taiwan.
Absolutely well said. Agreed, Sheridan. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.